A very warm welcome to Tech Mining. In this video of the full stack web development series you will learn HTML. HTML stands for Hyper Text Markup Language. It is a markup language for structuring and presenting content in a web browser for the World Wide Web, and is a core technology of the Internet. HTML is written in the form of HTML elements consisting of tags enclosed in angle brackets, within the web page content. HTML tags most commonly come in pairs like h1 and /h1, although some tags, known as empty elements, are unpaired, for example img. The first tag in a pair is the start tag, the second tag is the end tag. They are also called opening tags and closing tags. In between these tags web designers can add text, tags, comments and other types of text-based content. Each web page begins with a doc-type declaration which informs the browser about the HTML version the page is using. Although this declaration is not mandatory, it helps browsers to correctly render a page. Due to various flavors of HTML, declaration also varies as shown in this table. Let's begin by creating a simple HTML page. Open Notepad or any other text editor and type the code as shown in the code figure. A link is provided in the description to download all the code used in this tutorial. Save the file as mywebpage.html on your desktop or any other location you prefer. Once you save the file, the icon of the saved file would change to the icon of your default browser. Double-click the file to see your first web page in the browser as shown in the output figure. Let's go through the details of this example. Web pages are created using elements that define an HTML document. Elements are usually made up of two tags, an opening tag also called start tag and a closing tag, which is also called end tag. The text between HTML tags describes the web page. The body tags hold the visible page content. Only the content you provide in the body section is rendered in a browser, as illustrated in the previous output. Page heading is enclosed in the h1 tags whereas a paragraph is displayed within the p tags. The following elements can go inside an HTML file. The HTML element defines the whole HTML document. It has a start tag and an end tag. Each HTML element contains some content that sits between its opening and closing tags and tells the browser something about the information. This one contains two other HTML elements, head and body. The head element is a container for all the head elements. The head element must include a title for the document, and can include scripts, styles, meta information, and more. The title element defines a title for your HTML document and is a required element in the head section. When defined, the page title is shown in the browser's title bar and displayed in search engine results. See point A in the previous output. You can use h1 to h6 tags to define HTML headings where h1 is the most important heading and h6 is the least one. Paragraphs in an HTML document are defined using the p element. Keep two recommendations in mind while using elements in HTML documents. 1. Always put the end tags to avoid unexpected results or errors. 2. Although HTML tags are not case sensitive, it is recommended to use lowercase. HTML elements can have attributes. In this example, the anchor element, which is used to define links on a web page, has an href attribute that specifies the URL of the page the link goes to. Attributes are always specified in the start tag of the element and are made up of two parts, name and value, separated by an equals sign. Web page customization begins with HTML attributes. Attributes are responsible for customizing HTML elements and provide additional information about the contents of an element. While processing an HTML tag, the web browser looks to these attributes as guides for the construction of web elements. Without any attribute values specified, the browser will render the element using the default settings. The text "Visit CNN website" specified between the anchor tags will be displayed as a link on the web page. The closing tag is added after the text. This is the usual way to define links on web pages. Note that the attribute values should always be enclosed in quotes. Double style quotes are the most common, but single style quotes are also allowed. Attribute names and attribute values are case insensitive. However, recommended way is to use lowercase. Headings and subheadings in a document are used to present information in a hierarchical format. For instance, a document usually starts with a big heading before the main introduction of a topic, followed by relevant subheadings. You can use H1 to H6 tags to define headings in your website, where H1 defines the most important heading and H6 defines the least important one. Headings are displayed in different sizes by the browser. The content enclosed in H1 is the largest, and that in H6 is the smallest. You will learn how to set the size of content, its color, and font using cascading style sheets in another video. Here are some tips on how to properly utilize these tags to improve your page structure for search engine ranking purposes. 1. Don't use headings to make text bold. 2. Header tag, H1, H2, H3 etc., gives a specified amount of importance to the surrounding text on a page. So you can have as many H1 tags as necessary as long as you have the same amount of important sections on your page. 3. Usually one H1 tag is enough for the search engine to see what the page is about. 4. Multiple H1 tags on a website can trigger a penalty if you have other spamming techniques on your page. A paragraph is the composition of one or more sentences. Each paragraph is indicated by a new line. In HTML, you use the p-paragraph tag when you want to break up two streams of information into separate thoughts. Paragraphs are defined in the body tag. Most browsers display paragraphs with one blank line between them. In this example, we have two paragraphs on a web page. In the previous example, you saw how browser automatically shows a new paragraph on a new line. Suppose you have a situation where you need to add a line break inside the middle of a paragraph. In such a case, you can use the BR line break tag. Here we used two BR tags to add two line breaks between the About Us title and the adjacent paragraph. The HR tag, which stands for horizontal rule, is used to create a line between sections to separate content of your web page. Web developers usually add comments to HTML to understand what the code is expected to do. This markup is used to add comments to your HTML pages. Note that comments are ignored and are not displayed on a web page by the browser. In HTML, you can use these tags to present abbreviation or acronym. The optional title attribute of this tag can be used to provide the full form of the abbreviation, which is presented by browsers as a tooltip when the mouse cursor is hovered over the acronym. For example, when you rest your mouse over 4GL or API in these paragraphs, you will see the full human-readable description of these abbreviations. Quotes are used to emphasize excerpts of text. According to HTML specifications, there are normally two elements which are supposed to semantically mark up quotations, namely block quote and Q. Although both are intended to mark up quotes, they should be used in different contexts. In HTML, long quotation are defined by the tag block quote. Block quote are set off from the main text as a distinct paragraph or block. However, they refer to some external citation which isn't already mentioned in the content. This element can also have an optional attribute named site that specifies the location, in the form of a URL, where the quote has come from. The browser inserts white space before and after a block quote element. It also inserts margins. Short quotation is defined by the Q tag. The browser inserts quotation marks around the short quotation. In practice, usually only block quote and Q are used. The word surfing is often used while discussing the internet, which means moving from one web page to another. You can surf on the web using links. Links are created using the HTML anchor tag A. An anchor is used in 4 ways. 1. Create links to access other pages on the same website. 2. Create a link to another website or page. 3. Create a link to send email. 4. Create a bookmark inside a web page. Using a shorthand known as relative URL, you can link to other pages within the same website and do not need to specify the domain name. The first 4 links in this example demonstrate relative URL. When you link to a different website, the value of the href attribute will have the full web address for the site, which is known as an absolute URL. You define the link destination in the href attribute of the anchor element. The target attribute with the _blank value is used in this example to open Amazon's website in a new window. You can also create an image link in addition to text link using the img tag. The anchor element along with the href attribute can also be used to send email. You prefix mailto to the email address of the recipient after the href attribute. When you click the email link, the default email program opens a new message window displaying the recipient's address in the to box of your email application. Optionally, you can also add a subject line as shown in this example. Spaces between words should be replaced by %20 to ensure that the browser will display the text properly. Suppose in your website you have a long page with several sections. To make this page user-friendly, you use the bookmark feature in HTML by creating a list at the top of the page and link it to corresponding sections on the same page. You can achieve this task by using the ID attribute, which can be used with every HTML element. First, you need to identify the points in the page the link will go to and mark them with the ID attribute. Next, you link to these points using the hash symbol, followed by the value of the ID attribute in the href attribute of the created list. To save users from having to scroll back to the top, you also add a link at the bottom or at the end of each section, which instantly takes the user to the top. After creating the HTML page used in this example, you have to make your browser's window smaller at runtime to see the jumping effect. This is the list you defined using the hash symbol. If you click the third topic link, you are taken to that section. Clicking the top link takes you back to the list. The adage "a picture is worth 1,000 words" refers to the notion that a complex idea can be conveyed with just a single still image. This fits more in the world of web than any other place. A website having great images is more engaging than a dull text-based one. You add images to your web page to display company logo, images, diagram, chart or illustration. Images are defined using the img tag in HTML, which is an empty tag since it doesn't have an associated end tag. Some common attributes of img tag are src, alt, width, and height. The src attribute, which stands for source, is used to display images on a web page. Its value holds the location of the image. The alt attribute contains an alternate text that is displayed if the image cannot be displayed. The height and width attributes specify the image size, usually in pixels. HTML lists are great for calling your reader's attention to specific information. It has been a popular tool even when writing business and technical documents. Lists draw attention to important information. Readers like them because they are visually appealing and make it easy to quickly find pertinent information. In HTML you can use 3 types of lists: Ordered list. This list has items marked with numbers. It is defined using the OL tag and each item starts with the LI tag. Unordered list. Items in this list are marked with bullets. It is defined with the UL tag. Each list item is enclosed in the LI tag. Definition list. This list contains description of each item and is defined with the DL tag in conjunction with DT and DD to define list items and corresponding descriptions respectively. You can use different ordered and unordered list on your web page by applying the following type attributes. For example, if you want to specify bullet points in uppercase alphabets, append type equals A within the OL tag. You can also create nested listing by putting a second list inside the existing one. In this example, an unordered list is nested under a parent unordered list. A table is a set of data elements that is organized using a model of vertical columns and horizontal rows, the cell being the unit where a row and column intersect. In HTML you use 7 elements while defining a table. The table tag defines the table itself. T-head is used to group header content. T-body is used to group body content. TR is used to define rows in a table. Use TH for column heading. TD denotes table cell that holds data. T-foot is used to group footer content. This is an example of a horizontal table in which column headings are shown horizontally. You can also define headings vertically. Here's an example of vertical table in which headings are stacked on top of each other. The div tag defines a division or a section in an HTML document. It is used to group block elements to format them with styles and is often used together with CSS to lay out a web page. For example, you can create a div element to group header objects, such as logo and navigation links. A second one to group main content of the page. And the last one to group footer objects that include social media links or copyright text. The ID attribute used in this example references CSS rules to style a single element. The next video in this series is about CSS, in which you will learn how to style elements using CSS ID and class. While surfing on the internet, you sometimes come across some very attractive websites and wonder how developers created those websites. All modern browsers allow you to see source code of websites. Just right-click an HTML page and select View Page Source or similar option from the context menu. This will open a new tab or window showing the HTML source code of the page. In addition to this, you can also inspect an HTML element. Right-click on an element, and choose Inspect or similar option from the context menu to see both HTML and CSS code of that element. Developers use Elements and Styles panel to modify both HTML and CSS on the fly. Forms are everywhere on the web. You might have interacted with HTML forms on websites like Amazon, eBay, Yahoo, and Google. The use of form on a page is a higher-level phase of web development to collect information from visitors. Whether it's through registration forms, mailing lists, site searches, or online ordering, forms facilitate interaction between organizations or individuals with their clients or end users. Let's take Amazon as an example. You visit Amazon's website as a buyer and don't verbally tell Amazon to find an item. Instead, you interact with a form containing form controls in the shape of a search text box and a search button. You enter your search text into the text box, click the search button, and get the results in a clean list format that you can quickly browse through. From a seller's perspective, the process is slightly more complex, but again, involves forms and form controls. When you want to sell an item on Amazon's website, the first step is to register as a seller. During the registration process, you'll see a form with numerous form controls that collect different types of information from you. In HTML, you use form tag to create a form. All form controls reside inside this tag. Every form tag requires an action attribute which specifies where to send the form data when a form is submitted. You also use forms method attribute to send or retrieve data to or from server. This attribute can have either a get or a post value. The get method is the default and is used when you want to retrieve something from the server, while the post method is used to manipulate information on the server. The elements you can use in your web form include text and password fields, drop-down list, radio buttons, checkboxes, text area, button, and file input to upload a file. Text and password elements are the most commonly used input fields that are used in an HTML form and are defined with the input tag. The input tag is an empty tag without a closing tag and contains a type attribute which determines what kind of input is being created. The input type equals text defines a one-line input field that a user can enter text into. The input type equals password creates a password field. The characters in a password field are masked and are shown as asterisks or circles. Name and max length are the most utilized attributes associated with the input tag. Each form control should have a name to identify it on the server. Max length attribute is used to limit the number of input characters. In this example, both name and password elements can accept only 30 characters or less. If you're acquainted with blogs, you must have seen a large text box under a blog post where users provide their comments. This box is a multi-line input control and is defined using its own tag called text area. It can hold an unlimited number of characters and is specified by calls and rows attributes. The calls attribute, measured in numbers of characters, sets the width of the text area. The rows attribute indicates the height of the text area. The browser automatically adds a scroll bar when the text crosses the row attribute limit. Radio buttons let a user select only one of a limited number of choices. It is defined as input type equals radio and has three main attributes: name, value, and checked. The name is sent along with the selected value to the server. The value attribute is the value passed to a script or a CGI program to indicate which button is selected. Be sure you assign a different value to each button. The checked attribute sets a default value when the page loads into the browser and is used with only one radio button in a group. At runtime, when you select a radio option, the value of that option is set to true. The entire group of radio buttons shares a single name. To access the individual buttons, you treat the radio object as an array. The buttons are indexed, starting with 0. You use the checked property of a radio button to check its current state. Suppose a form named Contact has a radio button in a group named C-type and you want to check the state of the first radio button in this group. In this scenario, you will use this code. Checkboxes are defined using the tag input type equals checkbox. Checkboxes let a user select or deselect one or more options from the available choices. It has same attributes as radio buttons. It also has a single event, named onClick, which occurs whenever the checkbox is clicked. This event examines the checked property to see whether the box was turned on or off. Similar to radio buttons, a drop-down list box also allows you to select a single option from the provided list. Usage depends on the scenario. For example, if the list has few options, use the radio buttons, and if the list is long, choose a drop-down list box. In HTML, a drop-down list box is defined with the select tag in conjunction with two or more option elements. The option tags inside the select element define the available options in the list. An attribute called selected can be added to an option to mark it as the default selected option when the page loads. Reading the value of a selected item is a two-step process. You first use selected index property, and then use the value property to find the value of the selected choice. This uses the NIDX variable to store the selected index, and then assigns the value of the selected choice to the scat variable. After completing a web form, you need something to inform the browser to send the information to the server. A submit button is used to accomplish this task and is the recommended way to submit HTML forms. It is defined using the tag input type equals submit, and its value attribute acts as the button's label. After clicking this button, the data is sent to the page specified in the form's action attribute, which performs some actions with the received input. In this exercise, the information is sent to a page xyz.php on the server. The server processes the input and returns the answer as shown in the output pane. For this purpose, we used the get method, which retrieves the inputted information from the server. At this stage, if you click the submit button after running the example code, you'll get an error indicating that the browser could not find the file xyz.php. This is because we haven't set up a backend server to fulfill the request. Server processing is an advanced topic and will be discussed in later videos of this series. Besides submit, you can use two other types that perform form submission task, and these are reset and button. The reset element sets all the form fields back to their default value, or blank. The button element, which is discussed next, performs an action associated with a JavaScript event handler. If the user presses a submit or a reset button, you can detect it with the onSubmit or onReset event handlers. For generic buttons, you can use an onClick event handler. Just like desktop application forms, you can create a push button on a web form as well using this markup. The main difference between this element and buttons created with the input element is that you can add text or image inside a button element, which provides you more control over button's appearance. In this example, a small GIF image named add.gif, which is a tiny plus symbol, is used. This symbol is placed on the button labeled add to make it more meaningful. To allow users to upload their documents, images, videos, or other files to your web server, you again use the input element with type equals file attribute. In such situations, you must set the method attribute value to post. The accept attribute specifies the types of files that the server accepts. To specify more than one value, separate the values with a comma like this. If your form has different sections, you can separate them using field set element, which draws a box around the related form controls to group them. You add the legend tag immediately after the opening field set tag to define a caption that informs the purpose of that section. In HTML5, a new date value is added to the type attribute that displays a calendar control on your web page from which users can select a desired date as demonstrated in this example. As you can see, this time a separate label tag is used to display a label for the calendar element. Note that the for attribute of label element must be equal to the ID attribute of the related element to bind them together. There are some mandatory fields in a form that must not be left blank. For example, user ID, password, and email address are some fields that are considered mandatory on a web form. Users are alerted to provide such information if they omit them. This process is called form validation. Usually a scripting language such as JavaScript is used by developers to validate a form on client machines prior to posting data to the server. But now, HTML5 is introducing client-side validation to quickly identify problems in a form. The required attribute applies to all input fields, and specifies that an input field must be filled out before submitting the form. It is defined as an attribute of the input element. The placeholder attribute specifies a short hint that describes the expected value of an input field, for example a sample email address in the expected format. The hint is displayed unless you type something in the input field. If your form has mandatory email and URL fields, you can validate them using the new input type values like this. Browsers supporting HTML5 will automatically check and validate the correct format for email and URL. Like every good website, you can add search capabilities to your site. A search box allows users to search content that is not apparently visible to them. HTML5 has provided an input type called search to address search queries. Once again, the code in this example sends the search criteria to a page, abc.php, on the server to process the request. In HTML5 you can play movie clip and other video streams using the new video tag. The src attribute specifies the URL of the video file. The controls attribute displays video controls which include play, pause, seeking, volume, full screen toggle, captions or subtitles, if available, track, if available. The source element inside the video element is used to run this video on all supported browsers. You can specify alternative video or audio file type, such as MP4 or WebM, which the browser may choose from, based on its media type or codec support. If you want to play just an audio track, then use the audio tag to play audio files in HTML5. That's it for HTML. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumb up and subscribe to Tech Mining. In the next video you will learn how to use CSS3 to style your web pages. Thank you for watching.